Hey, thanks for joining me. My name is Taylor, or Dr. Taylor Burrows, if you don't know me. I am a mental health and marriage and family therapist. I work a lot with people around dating or just relationships in general, marriage, family. I've really fine-tuned a process, if you're interested, if you're single, about how to find an ideal partner. And it sounds kind of simple. I talked about it a lot in last week's video, but there's a simple formula that I go into a lot into more detail, but it's love plus desire plus logic equals an ideal partner. And what goes before that is an ideal self. So you have to develop yourself to the best of your ability, and then you can use those elements in order to find that ideal partner by drawing them out like a magnet. And you do that through values and building your character and defining what you need from a person in a complementary way, and that kind of life vision for what's coming into the future. And then when you find that person and as you vet them, you absolutely learn and grow. You don't stay stagnant, and there are missing pieces that are layers to that ideal self that you have cultivated on your own. But a lot of that process in that solitary stage is really important, and a lot of people get very discouraged when it feels like it's a year, it's 2 years, when is this happening? So hopefully you're going out and you're dating a bit, but maybe it's not physical dating, maybe it's online dating. And I have also another video called distance dating, because I like to distinguish between sort of the swipe apps and just online reality, digital reality, and how we have a whole world that we exist in on our phones. And we get to meet people and learn about people and connect with people and grow with people on our online networks, right? And so we don't even need online dating apps because we have this plethora of opportunity to get to know people. And so you can go ahead and watch that video if you'd like to watch that. Today, what I wanted to talk a little bit more about was in regards to trust and boundaries, and also this long distance relationship. So long distance relationships really require a lot of trust, and we always have to be mindful of our boundaries as well when we're talking about any type of relationship, really, not even just a romantic relationship. So to be honest, I myself am single. If you don't know that about me, I have been married, I'm divorced, and I'm single again. And it provides me a wealth of information of how to help my clients of what doesn't work and how to avoid failure. And ultimately, there's so many things that I wish that I knew then that I know now that would have made my life so much easier and so much better. But you can't go back, you have to only look forward. So now that I have learned all of what I've learned and I've compiled it into a really simplified system for you, I'm hoping that you will experience the same thing. Lots of people already have, and they've provided testimonials, which is great to know that it works. And from my experience, I live in a small island, and I've been here for 10 years, so there's really not a lot of people to meet. So I've gone online into my digital world and I've met some people. And, it's always good to physically meet eventually. And I have met one person who I connected with online previously that I had interest with, and that actually went really well, but it didn't continue, and that's fine. It wasn't meant to be for various reasons, and I learned a lot from it. And that's really important for people to view relationships in that sort of outcome independent way. Because when you try to force every interaction into a particular outcome, that's when we get into trouble. We're not really in the moment, we're not really vetting the actual connection. We're just sort of trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole or something like that. And it doesn't work, and it causes a lot of undue strain. So you have to realize that, if you're older, then you're going to want the next relationship. Like me, I want my next relationship to be the last relationship that I'm ever in. But if you're younger especially, you need to remember that you're going to have a few relationships before you have your last relationship. So recognizing that you still need to do the same process, but always stay outcome independent, because you're going to grow and change as well. And so if it's a 3-year relationship that ends, it should be able to end amicably because the two of you just get along anyway. So there were certain elements that caused it to end, but no harm, no foul. You can move on. It's not a huge hurrah. Obviously, there's going to be some loss and grief. You have to end a relationship. It usually is. But then you move on and you have the opportunity to not really start over from scratch because you've developed yourself and elevated yourself from that experience. And then you can apply it again with those learned lessons, right? So in regards to long distance relationships, if you are like myself in a situation where you have a very small community and there's not really very many prospects around, you have to kind of look elsewhere. One, if you have the means, travel, right? Traveling can be great, but who are you meeting on your travels? Are you meeting someone like traveling to, or are you meeting someone stationary? Be mindful of that. If you don't have any kind of connections to where you're going to, then you might be meeting people on a whim, and that can be sort of unstructured and difficult to steer in any particular direction. But if you do have this online network where you meet people, then you will build relationships. And if you can travel, then that's the way to do it, is whether it's the woman or the man traveling to meet the other person. I absolutely think that it's a great way to test it out and see how it goes without having to worry about the sexual intimacy, right? A lot of times that comes up is, how do you connect with someone? How do you know the chemistry is there? You can tell if there's chemistry. And I talked about this on my distance dating video. You can tell when there's chemistry, but you definitely want to follow up with that in the flesh sort of meeting. So let's say you go and you're not necessarily staying together, but you meet up and you hit it off and you start something. So then what do? At first, you can't rush to the whole cohabitation or whatever, moving cities, whatever it is that you feel most comfortable with. You have to go stepwise and see if you fit. So at first it's going to be a long distance thing. And how do you manage that? Should you manage it? Long distance relationships are so stressful and so tricky. In general, long distance relationships are not great, and you should avoid them if you can. But sometimes, usually if you're already in a relationship, there may be periods of time when you do have to spend some time apart. And so you can get through those periods of time. It's a lot easier once you have a couple of months, years under your belt in order to figure that out. But if you're starting off that way, it is exceptionally tricky because why? Trust. Trust is so hard and so precious to maintain and build on. So when you are in a long distance situation, you have to be so mindful of communication, of transparency, of boundaries, exactly what we're going to talk about next, because it goes hand in hand with trust. So boundaries are really the lines between you and another person. And boundaries need to be healthy. They need to be firm and clear and not rigid or not loose. So if you think about, there's 3 layers. Rigid is at the top, clear, healthy, firm boundaries in the middle, and then loose boundaries on the bottom. So loose boundaries is when you're all up in each other's business. There's no me, no him, or vice versa. It's just one messy clump of 2 people, always in each other's space, not being able to do their own thing, and that gets really codependent quickly. Now the opposite being the rigid boundaries. Those are when you're too detached, when there's not much connection, you don't have any flow together, there's no synchronicity or synchronization between you, and there's no functioning in rhythm, right? It's just, I'm doing my own thing and you're kind of a thing of convenience, right? And I kind of tell you how it goes. It's a one-way relationship for the most part. So that's not good either. That's unhealthy in a different way. So when you have those clear boundaries, when they're healthy, they're firm, but it's still like a very open, like you're talking, you're sharing, you're being honest, but you don't have to share everything. And depending on what the expectations are for the relationship, it may not even be a relationship, quote unquote, yet, but there's something happening, right? So if you want to call a relationship just a committed, monogamous, long-term relationship, then you might not consider this a relationship yet. But pretty much any connection between two human beings is a relationship, whether it's a friendship, a one-night stand, it's just a very, very, very short relationship with not very many expectations, if at all, or this vetting process. You're still in some type of relationship with someone, right? There's feelings, there's hopes, there's desires, there's vetting, like there's a lot going on. And so it can be a very confusing stage. And whatever you want to call it, you do have to have trust. You have to give trust. That's the thing, is that you're developing trust. But in order to develop trust, you have to give it. You have to be free with your trust until there's a reason not to be. If you've come this far to get to know somebody and vet them, to visit them, to talk to them often, then you have to know that the only way this is worth any of your time is if you trust them. You have to believe that what they say is true. You don't always want to be blind or naive to, the best case scenario. You still want to be rooted in logic, right? Have that groundedness to you. And what will allow that is your individuation. So that's going to be your personal boundary where you take care of yourself. You do what you need to do. You're going to make room and space for this person because you care about them and you want to see how this connection develops. And so building trust requires giving trust, and that means communication, that means responsiveness, being able to be there for the other person when they need you. In the beginning stages, you might not feel obligated, but you want to be there, right? So the person is going to begin to trust you based on your character, your compassion, your attentiveness. Do you take forever to respond to texts? Do you avoid phone calls? What is your language like? I mean, the whole texting communication style is a whole chapter in and of itself. But you shouldn't have to overthink everything. You shouldn't have to overthink it all. But obviously, when it's in the beginning stages, you are going to be intentional in order to impress people. I mean, that's kind of how it goes, right? But you want to make sure that you're still being honest and you're still being authentic. And the most important thing is, as you're vetting somebody from up close or afar, you have to be honest, because if you're not projecting your true self, you're definitely not going to be getting what you need to know, the data, back from the other person as you're vetting them. So if you want a trustworthy person that you can respect because they're honorable and are a man or woman of character or virtuous or whatever the case may be, you've got to be that too, right? If you give off fun and games and frivolity, then don't be surprised if you get that back in return. So sometimes when we're talking about a long distance situation, your mind can play tricks on you. You can read into things, and there may be one more neurotic person than the other. Maybe it's the woman, usually it is, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's the man. That happens too. There could be possessiveness and jealousy and all that sort of stuff. And those are not necessarily good, but remember, there should be a nice give and take if we think about the boundaries again. So there should be a flow of information. And in order to build that trust and give that trust without being really anxious, you have to also get something in return. So that's when the other person should be forthright. Shouldn't be too guarded or holding back, because that can be difficult to trust. That's like trusting blindly and a total gamble. And so that can bring up a lot of anxiety for people. And the more, the longer that sort of stagnates, then the more trouble you may find yourself in that situation. It could just blow up in your face and not go anywhere, because that kind of ruined it. Once you sort of lose that trust or you overreact to something, it can just be a snowball and never get back to where it was. So to avoid that, you really need to maintain your composure, and that's going to be where you self-regulate. That's going to be you taking care of your own needs. So I know I said I was going to talk about trust, and I was going to talk about boundaries, and I was going to talk about long distance relationships. I talked a little bit about self-regulation before as well. These are all concepts that are important for everything. I mean, it overlaps on almost every video, and we're almost building a library that could be an instructional course on how to, again, develop your ideal self by mastering yourself as much as possible. It's not going to be perfect, but it's not supposed to be perfect. And then attracting that, preparing. It's the preparation of welcoming that ideal partner to your ideal self, and then you continue to grow, right? But if you don't do that work before you find your ideal partner, then you're not going to be ready. And so your ideal partner is going to be a reflection, a complement to you and your ideal partner. And self-regulation is a huge part of that, especially during, sorry, there's some bugs around, especially during that period of vetting. If you're long distance, I mean, it can be anxiety provoking even in a face-to-face situation, right? So you don't want your mind to play tricks on you. Why isn't he calling? Why isn't she picking up? Why is she not home? Why is she out? She didn't tell me she was going to go. Why isn't he? You know, you can kind of go all over the place and spiral out. And it could be based on your previous experiences. It could be based on past relationships. It could be based on your family upbringing. It could just be you're more of a neurotic person because you've never really focused on how to do self-regulation. So a lot of those skills that are required are the general self-help skills. Meditation, mindfulness, exercise is so important. Specifically, weightlifting, really important. Just putting some resistance and strength training into your exercise routine really helps. And also, the cardio, the yoga, the calisthenics, all of that. There's, nothing you can't do that won't be helpful in that regard for the most part. And even, men or women, but men especially, having any kind of combat, martial arts or jiu-jitsu or whatever, like any of those things can really help with anxiety in particular. But with mindfulness, because you're in the moment and you can't think, otherwise you're going to get hit and that's going to hurt. So you're really in the moment. Oh, and boxing too, kickboxing, boxing, whatever it is. So those are some examples there, but also it could be writing, it could be being in nature, gardening, playing with your animals, having a hobby, just being able to focus on, if you're feeling anxious, bringing yourself down, if you're feeling low and depressed, bringing yourself up, and generally just moderating and regulating your overall moods by yourself responsibly. And sometimes that may require talking to a close friend or loved one, and that's okay. But you will also want to be mindful of not overloading or oversharing with people that are close to you, because it can kind of shift things sometimes in relationships, and you want to be able to maintain that, and then keeping it within the couple system as much as possible. So I hope that makes sense. I know we could go into much more detail in each of those topics, but I do want to encourage you that whether it's in person or whether it's online and long distance, that you don't just sort of willy-nilly your way through it. Like, you really have to be intentional and mindful of where you're at. Don't always default to pointing a finger to the other person. It's really important to reflect on what could I be doing better? How could I be making this more pleasant? How could I be contributing to a successful outcome more, rather than expecting the other person to be perfect or to be the one carrying the weight? I find a lot of times women have been sort of trained to be selfish in that regard, and you're making me this, or you're not doing this for me. And they're very whiny and complainy, and it's not attractive, it's not responsible, and it's definitely not going to contribute to a successful relationship. So instead, making sure that you take care of yourself, focus on whatever it is that you're doing for income, focus on your housekeeping, being, adulting, I don't like to use that word, your actual aesthetics, your skincare routine, your healthcare routine, just nurturing yourself, having proper sleep, getting some sunshine, and being a lady and being pleasant. It's so important to just be pleasant, to smile, to have fun in a healthy way, and to not get frustrated. I did a whole newsletter. I have a newsletter as well, so that link is going to be below, and you can click the link to subscribe to the newsletter. It goes out weekly. I did a whole newsletter on female masturbation. Now, a lot of people unsubscribed to this because they were uncomfortable with the topic, but I did go into, should women masturbate or shouldn't they masturbate? Should they do it single or when they're coupled? And how do you do it if you want to, and how do you stop it if you don't? So I covered basically every angle. And it's important for women to know what those limits should be. And basically, it's going to be something that's a personal choice. But in those moments, the reason why I'm talking about this is I'm talking about self-control. So in those moments when you feel frustrated, you're single and you're frustrated, you want to get what you want. You want that person to be responsive to you. You want that relationship to already exist. You're impatient, or maybe it's a sexual urge and you just really want to, do it. And you really desire this person and you want it to be them, but it's not there yet, right? So, not to trivialize it, but I'm just trying to explain that there are ways for you to chill out and get your mind off of it, focus on other things, regulate yourself out of that mood, and just slow down. Literally, just slow down, catch your breath, get focused, relax, escape. You could do a little reading, you could watch a little Netflix, you can go for a walk, go for a swim if you're in my neck of the woods, or whatever the case may be. And take care of yourself. Eat well. Don't forget, diet is really, really important as well. So all of those things. Stick to the basics. If ever in doubt, don't spiral out and do something that you're going to regret later. Take your time. Be patient. Trust. Think good thoughts. There are people out there that do bad things. You can't always control it. You do your best. But don't personalize it. If they do something bad, then they did something bad. And you don't have to take responsibility for that. It wasn't your fault for not seeing it. If you're paying attention and you're going step by step and not getting ahead of yourself. So then, again, just go slowly, be in the moment, have your vetting system prepared, and enjoy the ride. It's really, really important to enjoy the process. So hopefully you will find your ideal partner, but I'm not giving up on you yet, and I don't want you to give up on me yet. We're in this together until, we all find our ideal partners, and then we'll be able to talk about the next steps as well. So feel free to add your comments and questions below in the comments, or you can reach out and contact me via email or book a session with me directly. So whatever you feel more comfortable doing is fine. So I'll talk to you later. Ciao.